basically to train young men and women in the trade, and just to give them a trade for life. This is something that I know that I can do or anybody else can do anywhere in the world. I've been there, worked overseas, worked on some of the most secret places, powerhouses, space shuttle plants, things of that nature. So my non-profit is going to be basically to be able to house and train. I want to start out with the underprivileged people, meaning kids that's in orphanage home, things of that nature, or kids that just don't have any kind of guidance. So that's where I am. So I want to be able to have a top-notch program, um, business-minded, educated-minded people surrounding me, because I know for a fact that this trade, you learn one, you'll eat, you'll be able to eat, provide for yourself for life, no matter whether you're educated, whether you can read or not. So I just want to be able to get mindful people around me, people that's a little bit more probably experienced with me in trying to educate people, because I'm not a teacher, but I can train. And that's where I am. So that's why I want to try to get this nonprofit together and have just open up eyes and minds to this world today, because again, jobs are needed, skilled people are needed always. So that's where I am.
Okay. Patrice, can you tell us about your business?
Hello, everyone. I'm Patrice. I am actually the owner of two separate businesses. Professionally Afrocentric is the first business that I started in 2019 after face injury. Basically, what I do is I sell African-inspired items, earrings, necklaces, jewelry, shirts, clothing, just about anything you could think of that is African-inspired, I carry. I started a second business after my foot surgery. And basically it started out as just crafting, resin crafts for the most part. And I've now branched out into doing sublimation for t-shirts, making different things with resin, just about anything that you can think of for branding, I'm able to put together and make happen for you.
Okay, thank you. Ashley?
Hi, my name is Ashley Johnson. My business is Juice Around the Way. I make all natural juices, lemonades, and wellness shots, and I'm located in Jacksonville, Florida. For my nonprofit side of things, I would love to have a youth center tied in with my juicing business. Just not only having like a retro game room for kids to come and get away. I also want other leaders to come in and teach and mold these kids and just be able to leave with something, wanting to come back for more.
Okay, awesome. And Mr. iPhone, can you introduce yourself and tell us about your business?
Yes, my name is Mr. Winter, and my business name, You Works Wonders, and it's a remodeling company that I start, and it's a small one. I'm in Florida right now, and I'm trying to attack more the retiree people that retiree need work at their house. That means that that's why I'm going in business to help the retiree, the one that have a house, wow, the house is running down, and I will assist them by helping them. Wow, that's it.
Okay.
Yes.
Okay, thank you, and welcome, Retivia, who's also my mom. Can you introduce your business, your ministry?
Hi, I'm the founder and of the King's Bride Outreach Ministries Incorporated. It is a non-for-profit ministry. I've been in ministry over 35 years. I founded the King's Bride Outreach Ministries Incorporated in 2009. Whereas that I didn't have a 501c3. Coupled with that, I would like to have a 501c3 coupled with that so I can branch out, do bigger things. I'm also a retired nurse. I'm an author as well. So I do a lot of things through my ministry. I do a lot of speaking engagements. I'm a teacher as well. And there's a whole lot of other different titles behind my name, whereas that we won't get into that. But with the non-for-profit, I would like to branch out, learn how to write grants or get grants that other people can be involved. And as everybody said on the introduction, my maintenance guy, Mr. Hughes, is on there,
Yes.
which he's
yes.
a dynamic builder. I'm so glad that he came on because he was actually about a month ago. Did I know anybody? So this is a blessing that my daughter introduced this to us, as well as her father, James. So with that, I just want to branch out, get some more people involved that we can teach as well how to get these grants and how to build communities.
Okay.
Yeah.
And Miss Ernestine, can you just introduce yourself and just tell us a little bit about your ministry and what you would like to do?
Yes, hello everyone. Sorry about the blackout, but I'm not at home. I was rushing trying to get to somewhere to set up so I can be in on this Zoom call. Anyway, I'm new to this. So formerly I was a school teacher, administrator, and I also did have a children's advocate center located in Gary, Indiana. I'm always and have always dabbled into business kinds of things. And so presently I am also co-authoring a book with some friends of mine who were also teachers at the time that I was. So we kind of connected back together. So we're doing Sisters of the Gift. It's a book that's based on our experiences in our lives and our times together, as well as some organizations that we did belong to. And what we had planned and launched out to do is to try to secure funds, profits, whatever, for the gifting to other students and children, organizations, 501 not-for-profit kinds of situations, so that we can help children and parents be better parents for their children. And I'm always open to new things and things to try to help the community and families, especially because being in the arena of an educator, you see a lot, you hear a lot, and you find out a lot about what's absent in our Black families and communities. And I'm a person about building up and not tearing down, you know, so I'm an encourager, if I could say that. So it's good to be among others of like-minded kinds of visions. And that's why what I am, I'm a visionary. I do a lot of dreaming. So I have other books in the works too. And so hopefully you'll be hearing about them in the near future. Thank you.
Okay, awesome. And for those that are just joining us, I'm Mina Johnson. So I own Elegant Occasions Event Center, where we do events and all that stuff in Atlanta, event planning and everything. And Ernestine is one of my assistants that helps me out with all of my events. So I started Ground Zero Business Consultant last year. It's something that I knew I was supposed to be doing, but just didn't have time to do. But COVID hit, and I've been like hard charging on the business consulting side since then. I've been doing workshops since last March or April or so. Most of the workshops have been free, just trying to help business owners get themselves together, just encourage people during this downtime with COVID. And I started doing these awesome workshops and just bringing people together. And Cal has been one of my vendors at Elegant Occasions since I first started. So about 7 years I've been working with Cal. And I had a party this past March where I needed something, and I called Cal and he brought it. And when he came to pick it up, like the next day, we had this long whole hour conversation. I told him I have a class to teach today. And he was like, what class are you teaching? I'm like, well, it's a business consulting class. And that opened up to all of this. So I've been knowing him for 7 years, but for such a time as this, I mean, I found this whole other part of Cal that I never knew about. We never had this long conversation, but is the time where I need this information. And it's something that I've been wanting to do with turning Ground Zero Business Consulting into a nonprofit. And here comes Kyle. And Ernestine was privy to that conversation that day while we were setting up another event. And I was just getting so excited about what he was trying to do, just help people just understand, mainly Black people understand the benefits of having a nonprofit outside of having a for-profit business, and learning how to write their own grants. So it's a wealth of information that I know he's going to share. I'm also talking about it on my Talk It Out Tuesday program on Facebook that'll air on Tuesday. But this is like a really intimate sneak preview of what we're trying to do together, as far as having some actual maybe in-person or Zoom sessions as far as grant writing and establishing nonprofits. So Kyle, I'll turn it over to you. Feel free to introduce yourself. And if you guys have any questions, please feel free to ask Kyle. If you don't have questions to ask right off the bat, just go ahead and mute your phones, so at least we won't have any outside interference. So Kyle, it's all yours.
All right, well, thanks, Mina, and thanks for having me, and it's a pleasure to meet each of you. Hope you can hear me clear enough. I am J. Kyle Bryant, and by profession, I am a physical scientist with the federal government, but I have worn many hats in my professional career, and I've been a grants administrator on the university level at my alma mater, Fort Valley State University. I was their first grants administrator, and I developed the grant writing curriculum for that university. I'm certified through the Grantsmanship Institute, and I'm a grants writing instructor, as well as someone who writes proposals for clients. Just to give you that aspect of me. But beyond all of that, at my heart, at my core, I'm an entrepreneur. And what I see from my environmental career, I have always worked, I've always preferred to work with our people because I see the challenges our communities face. And so even though I work for the federal government now, I am working in a sector that deals with environmental justice, which is dealing with how Black and brown communities happen to live in communities where there are landfills and toxic waste and things like that. So I have been studying for 13 years the dynamic of, well, how did our communities get saddled with all of this? And then the agencies try to repair things by offering grants and things, but we don't have the capacity to write grants in most cases. Most of our communities don't even know how to start. You know, it's great that the agency offers something, but if you don't know how to use it, I mean, it's like you see the UNICEF commercials about starving people over in Africa, and you know, they bring them bags of wheat, but they live in a desert. So where are they going to grow something in the middle of the desert? You know, so what value does it really have? You know, and so my thing is, I positioned myself with my own private business, Bryant Global, to be an intermediary, to introduce grantsmanship and the language of proposal development to clients, particularly our communities, because we have limited capacity, but we have the most need for those types of resources to build our capacity to meet the needs of the 21st century African American community. I mean, it's long overdue. Under the Obama administration, it was first pointed out that, you know, he couldn't directly just sign a check for all African Americans. Here's your reparations check. You know, now you're even with white folks. Now that's not going to happen. We know that he can't do that. And being the first Black man in that office, we know they weren't going to let that happen. So what he tried to do was open up the avenues of the federal government, the coffers, to say, if you are positioned correctly, you can tap into some of these resources to do this, do some of the things that your community needs. And that's when it became more ideal for people to get their nonprofit status and then go after some of these things that they want to address. The difference, we all have for-profit businesses. The difference is, like I like to tell people, your for-profit business is your profit and your nonprofit entity is your passion. Like I was telling Mina on a call, a week or so ago that I have a good friend of mine who graduated from Fort Valley State University with me, and he's a scientist also, but he works for the city of Atlanta. And, you know, his job is like doing wastewater oversight, wastewater projects. That's his day job. How he pays his mortgage and things. But his passion after work every day, he has 3 sons that play Little League Baseball, and he's passionate about that. And he's always talking about Little League Baseball. And every time I turn around, he's going on to some tournament, or he's selling me tickets to some banquet, or trying to get in my pocket for some little thing. Buy these tickets, come to this bake sale. We got a fish fry, something to raise money for the ball club, for new uniforms, for whatever. And I said to him, you know, you need to be in a nonprofit, because even I belong to a number of social organizations. I'm a member of Alpha Phi Alpha Fraternity Incorporated, and even you would think Greek letter organizations have some knowledge about grants and things, but it's still very nuanced to us as well. You know, I don't know if it's we're afraid of it because it's the federal grant money or what have you, but we just don't seem to know enough about it, and it makes it harder for us to meet the needs of the community. So my thing is to introduce to people who have a business why it's important to have a nonprofit arm. Like I said, our communities are resource deficient. And what do I mean by that? I mean that everybody in our community who has a 9 to 5 and you have some sense of sustainability, you look around your community and say, man, we really need this, or we don't have a place for the kids to play. They're out on the street corners, and that causes all sorts of ripple effects of other problems, and it brings down property values, and it raises the crime rate, and it makes people more fearful about going outside and things like that. If we only had a youth center for kids to play in, or they could play 24-hour basketball and have a night gym where they'd be off the streets. There's programs that have worked in other cities, and depending on what part of the country you're in, you might see firsthand where that's a problem, or in other places, it might not be a problem yet. But these are endemic factors of greater ills. And there are federal monies and foundation monies out there to address some of these ills. But the problem is there's not enough people to run those programs. And people who run a 9 to 5, have a 9 to 5 company, often, you know, people often have more money than they have time. But if you could have grant money to do more things, then you could hire people, coaches and mentors and all sorts of support staff to run successful programs while you still were focused on your main business. Unfortunately, in our community, there are not enough people who are visionaries, or who are able to take their vision and implement it. You might have a vision, but if you don't know how to implement it, it's that old religious parable of faith without works is dead. You can have all the passion in the world, but I have seen in many communities where I've taught nonprofit grants, the fundamentals of proposal development and grants management, where you just have that one person that's passionate about this key issue in their community, and there's no succession plan, and they hoard that information. And when that person dies or moves or gets his dream job and moves to another state or wherever to the big city, then that whole initiative dies in that community. Just this past week, one of my colleagues who was a city grassroots environmentalist in Fort Valley, Georgia, he passed away of a heart attack. He was 74 years old. And but he was the only person from that community that was passionate about environmental issues, to the point that he was educating the public. And he was the only one to go after grants and start a nonprofit organization, and just to educate the community, and producing a newsletter that's saying, this is why you should be concerned, citizens, about what's going on at this old pesticide plant that's contaminating the drinking water of our city. But now that he's gone, there's no plan for anybody to pick up the torch and carry it forward. And so for people like us, once again, I relate things back somewhat biblically, because and the things in nature, because that's the way many people in our community understand it. And it makes it easier to understand what their mission is. But basically, people like you who are already established in business, in order to grow programs, it's one thing to grow a program that you're passionate about, but also to teach up the next generation who's going to run these programs. Like case in point, one community I've worked with in the past in my day job is trying to build a cadre of a nuclear workforce to work in the nuclear industry 10 years into the future. So what that community is doing through funding through the Department of Energy, and this is in the Augusta area, the Savannah River corridor, where you have Plant Vogtle, which is the only nuclear plant that's been expanding to 2 reactors in 30 years. And then you have the Department of Energy's Savannah River site, which is where they make components of nuclear weapons. Problem is, people from South Carolina and Eastern Georgia don't know anything about radiation. They're fearful of it. They always thought that, oh, well, that's the bomb plant. That's for white folks with high technical STEM degrees to get those kind of jobs. And so a lot of people who've taken those jobs come from Northeast US. But now they see that there are entry-level jobs where there's just a greater need and there's nobody with the capacity to fill it. So they had a 10-year plan. Like I said, you want to grow apples, you don't start with the plant. You start with the seed and you plant it in the ground and you fertilize it and you add water and you add sunlight and photosynthesis, and it will eventually sprout up from the seedling into a plant. And you keep nurturing it and feeding it through education. That's like the photosynthesis and sunlight and water. And eventually, during the right season in harvest, you'll reap your harvest of apples. You'll have engineers that you want. So basically, at the layman's level, they have a need for these entry-level jobs for nuclear welders and people who work on welding in these trades and the job skills that are needed. Nuclear plumbing, those are real things, and those are specialties. So if you know how to plumb, if you know how to weld, you can go to now Augusta Area Tech and all these junior colleges where they introduce these training sessions. And now somebody with a high school diploma can go and get a certificate, not only in welding, but nuclear welding. And these people are making $50 to $75 an hour. It had me reconsidering what I do as a physical scientist. I said, I could certainly hold a welder's torch for that kind of money. I can learn how to hold a welder's torch. But so what I'm saying is you have to be able, as a visionary for your community and what you see is missing, because this is the way I look at my community. I look at what's missing and figure out how to put a puzzle together to solve that problem. And once you solve a problem, people with like minds figure out how to build their piece of the puzzle. You don't have to solve every problem. You just have to see that you get the synergy going, and it's a ripple effect. It's like everybody else will find their niche. In every community, you're going to have certain people that have your passion for the same thing you're interested in, but almost each and every one of you mentioned something totally different. And if you are all in one community, then that's what builds community. If your passion is youth programs, if your passion is there's no adequate housing for the elderly or retirement community in this community. There are not enough bus lines here or after school programs or not enough playgrounds, whatever your issue is, or feeding the homeless, what have you, there's money out there to get. So what I try to teach, not only in the sense of just grant writing, but just in basic community capacity buildings, not the what, but the so what. Why do you need to know this? Why do you need to care? Because we all share a community. So in order to build a greater community, I want to make sure of your reasons for wanting to start a nonprofit. Most nonprofits that I've taught, whether they be the Black churches or other novices who just wanted to find out more about grant writing, they have this cavalier approach. Oh yeah, you get me the money, I know how to spend it, but that's not how it works. and you can't just spend federal money. There's a lot of things that you have to consider, like really give some deep thought to why you want to write a proposal. It does take some work, but it is doable. But you got to ask yourself the hard question: why do you want this funding? Remember that federal money, in particular, that means grant money that comes from a federal agency. That money is taxpayer money, so you're already paying into that. But you can't do certain things with that money. You can't pay off your Mercedes or buy you a Mercedes with federal money, or foundation money for that matter. But you can. What you have to do, you have to help everyone, or you have to at least state that your grant, it doesn't limit to just the people, the members of your church, or the people in your immediate community. You have to offer your services to anyone who fits the criteria of what you're looking for. Like there are grants that are specific, like some agencies will offer grants for looking to fund after school programs for at-risk youth. And in some communities, that might be poor white people. But in your community, that might be poor African Americans who have single parent homes and things like that, what we're all familiar with. And if that's the case, then I teach you how to read the request for proposals. Get familiar with the nomenclature of grants, the difference between a narrative statement and an introduction and a background statement. They all mean the same thing, but they ask for something slightly different. The difference between a process budget and a product budget. Like, are you defining a process? Or are you delivering a finished product, like a report or something at the end of your project that is going to be beneficial to the government or the funding agency? So I get you comfortable with the language, what the methodology is all about. That's telling how you're going to do something. And I package that into a training class, and I make it a 1-day class, so it's not too much strain on the brain, but it's into 2 segments. So first is just get you comfortable with the language of proposals. Then 2, to give you tips and tricks of how to actually research where the money is, because I give you some of that as well. There's federal monies, like I said, but a lot of people aren't familiar with all the agencies of the federal government. There's a lot that are not as widely known. I'm always surprised when I go in the communities and tell them that I work for the Environmental Protection Agency, and they never heard of it before. But when I go to high schools, then they say, oh, the group from the Simpsons movie. I say, what? Yeah, in the Simpsons movie, they had a big parody about the Environmental Protection Agency. They said, we're the agency that does nothing because we don't clean up the environment. So, I mean, but it's funny how people remember you. That's all I'll say. But there's federal monies that each agency has to allot for a number of issues affecting communities. And I teach you how to look for grants in some of the areas you wouldn't expect to find it. Like, say, if you were interested in youth programming, like say you wanted to teach an after school program or something like that. It's all in how you phrase it in your application. You could apply to say something like the Agency for Children and Families, which is generally a federal foundation, an agency that funds like the TANF programs and the EBT cards and things like that, and looks at WIC vouchers for single mothers. Well, they often sometimes will have a solicitation for a grant and say, okay, well, how does what I want to do relate to what they fund? And so you can say, okay, I already have this community program in mind. If I have a facility, I need a place that's going to offer nutritious meals or snacks for these kids while they're in an after school program. So let me get the funding from that grant to cover that piece of it. So I can hire a kitchen staff and a nutritionist and say, this is how I plan to use this $50,000 grant in order to subcontract the kitchen from this Boys and Girls Club and use it after school to provide snacks for this program that already exists. Another thing you want to think about is like you do in the marketing of your business. Identify your competition if you have any. Identify who your potential competitors might be and do some field reconnaissance and sort of see how they operate currently and what they're missing. Because there's a lot of nonprofit groups that operate that say they operate and advocate for maybe what you say you want to advocate, but they don't come to your community. So to say, okay, well, yeah, like there's YMCA's and YWCA's and boys and girls clubs, but are any in your neighborhood? And how much more difficult would it be for you to say, well, how difficult is it to get a boys and girls club open up in my community? And if that's problematic, because that money's going into that national structure and then they would manage the programming in and out of that facility, then why can't you create something different? And offshoot, say that because the nearest Boys and Girls Club is not on the bus route from my community, the nearest one is 15 miles away, you want to use that as leverage in your actual proposal to say, due to proximity, due to your knowledge of the community and the needs, and do your own homework also on the front end. Grants, grant funders like to see that you got empirical data when you're writing a proposal. And I talk about this in my facilitations. It's talking about how well do you know your community that you're trying to serve by giving real numbers and data. And you can do this like a simple survey. You can say, and you could get a lot of, I tell you in my course how to get some of this information, where you could get some census data, like, but like in your introductory statements, that what you're going to grab the funder with, you're going to hit them with these like wow statements, like saying that 70% of the teenagers in South Fulton County, Georgia, don't finish high school. We want to bring into that by bringing a mentorship and tutoring program, and we find out why they're not graduating, what makes them want to drop out of school and think that there's no other hope, even though we know the value of education. Where is the educational system failing, and how come they haven't created any kind of reciprocity or any kind of system to keep them in school? So you can be a partner with the school system. Once you become the catalyst for change that benefits another cog in the wheel, then you can approach them and say, now what grants are you all going after that I could be a partner on? You say, you'll be our.
Hey, Cal, I have a question.
Mhm.
I have a question. So with the grants, right?
Mhm.
Is it better to, like you're saying, try and attack it yourself? You know, I'm a new business owner. I could write, but I don't know if it would be, you know, grant worthy writing. But is it better for me to do it myself, or is it better for me to like pay somebody to actually write my grant for me?
It's kind of hit or miss. Just understand one thing. When you hire a grant writer, there's a lot of people that get taken advantage of by people who, you know, say, I'm a retired school teacher, so I know how to write, so let me write this grant for you. The problem with that is whatever a grant writer writes, you have to do if it gets funded. You know, and so a grant is a personal instrument. So if it has to be in line with first what the funder wants, but how you plan on approaching it. So you have to be intimately involved in it. You can't just say, I paid you $1,500 to write this, and if it gets funded, I'll just pay you your money and then you could go away. No, you have to be lockstep with them and understand what they committed you to in that proposal. Because in your mind, if you said, I was going to have an after school program and I just figured 25 to 30 students, you know, once a month, but they committed you to 50 students every weekend, then you got to think about, well, whoa, I got to feed these people. I got to house them somewhere. I didn't plan on all of this. You have to understand, and they have to understand. You all have to see eye to eye on what the vision is.
Okay.
So it's better to do it, I guess, with someone who's had grant writing experience to sort of handhold you to make sure that they're reviewing it to say, oh, you didn't really answer this question sufficiently enough, so they might throw your proposal out. Another thing is a grant writer can't guarantee you success. All they could do is get you to some point of making sure that it's reviewable, because it is entirely possible. There's not unlimited funds, on grants. In many cases, like at the EPA, we have an environmental justice small grant out that we're giving, like, I think 5 out to each region. There's 10 regions. So in the Southeast, they're only giving 5 grants out. So what if you write the 6th best proposal and they're only funding 5 of them? So it might have been worthy of being funded, but they only chose the top 5 based on how it was written or where the priority is. There's a lot of variables that go into play in how a proposal gets funded or not, whether you get the grant or not. And if they haven't funded a lot of grants in your area before, then there's likely that you could get a grant. Or if you have gotten grants before, then they say, okay, well, we could trust that community because they've got these other groups getting federal funds, and we know that they seem to be doing some big things. So this is where I teach you how to do some research on the agency. And this is how you could put in your little pressure points when you're writing your proposal. You can say, according to your website, you haven't funded a project in this area over the past 5 years. And so this is the first EPA grant that has been applied for by any organization in this community. And so this is why I think, it's time that we get some of these tax dollars to support this effort here.
Okay, and I have one more question. So with me, of course, owning an event center, mainly operating my for-profit business, and then having Ground Zero business consultant, if I change it into a nonprofit, do I have to dedicate, say, 100% of my time to that nonprofit entity, I guess, to qualify for the grants? How does that work?
Yeah, a lot of people ask, how do I make money in a nonprofit? Well, the way to do it is you are allowed a salary, but where most of our people make the mistake is, say if they're giving $100,000 grant out for some kind of community type service project, you can't write 50% of that for your salary. You could say, for instance, you can estimate the salary of the person that would be, say, the project manager. And so say if that person were to work 8 hours a day, 5 days a week, that would be like a $50,000 a year salary for, a community organization, a project manager. And so out of that time, say you're going to spend 20% or 30% of your time working on that because you got a for-profit business to run. So that's 30% of your time is going to be spent on the nonprofit side. And so you would take, say, that $50,000 and say 30% of that, which is $15,000, is how much you would say is your salary to run that. Well, for $100,000, that would be a $30,000 salary. And then from that, you would run your programming, and I show you how to write out your budget and line item it and give justification for it. The only thing in your budget you have to do is show the key personnel. These are the people that are being paid for work, but you hope to have volunteers and people. Sometimes you can write in stipends, like if you're like hosting business seminars and things, and sometimes it's a challenge in our community to get people to show up. I know that when we host public meetings, it's a shame in the South, but you got to come with, a pan of fried chicken to keep people's attention for a meeting, especially at 6 o'clock at night. It's like chicken and pound cake. It's just like church, that keeps their attention long enough with some red Kool-Aid and they're good to go. They'll listen to whatever you got to say. So all I'm saying is you can write in a salary like that, and the rest you can include as in-kind service. And in-kind service is like, okay, well, if you actually are spending, maybe it's 20% you're offering towards the project, but 10% of that time you're donating. Say you already host a workshop for businesses. And so some of that time is all the time you spend in preparing your coursework and what you're going to do on the Zoom call and what you're going to talk about in the curriculum over the course of your seminars. That's in-kind time. So say you spend 2 hours preparing a PowerPoint for that, and registering on Zoom and consulting with who your speakers might be, you might spend, say, 5 hours a week. Well, 5 hours times whatever your base salary for being a project manager is in-kind service. Say you make $25 an hour, as you know, if it's 50,000 a year, $25 an hour times 5 hours, $250 worth of in-kind service per week that you're spending. And that adds up. So saying this is how much I've invested that didn't really cost you a dime. But like I said, most people have more money than they have time. Your time is valuable. So document that. But I also teach you how to, like I said, get information about your target audience. Like I said, with your particular interest in teaching business development to business owners, Black business owners, that's already been done by other nonprofit groups. Like I mentioned, the Women's Economic Development Agency in Atlanta, who is an organization much like yours, for profit at first, but they started a nonprofit arm to teach Black people how to write business plans. And they have 10-week classes, and that week one is like, over the course of 10 weeks, you develop your marketing strategy, your whole business plan, and then you end up with a notebook full of everything you need. And at graduation, at the end of 10 weeks, they introduce you to financial institutions that will give low interest loans to people who own businesses who completed that program, because they know you know how to write a business plan now, and you know how to manage money, and you know what things to do and what not to do. So they got money from the Small Business Administration to run that. So that provides a benefit to who minorities, minority women specifically, but any minority can go to those courses and take them, and you get the grant money for it. So the people who attend those courses think, oh, wow, you're a great person giving back to the community, but they don't need to know that you made that money from taxpayer dollars. But it's not hiding anything. It's completely legal and above board. But this is the driver that makes people like you, the visionaries, keep the gears turning, because you can't exhaust all your energy on your for-profit business and your passion, your nonprofit entity. If you have monies coming in that can help you augment some of that to supply, and money, the grant money doesn't have to come in the forms of money. I've written a grant proposal for 2 environmental justice organizations that I was affiliated with, where it was just for equipment, a $20,000 grant to the Environmental Support Center for a laptop computer, LCD projector, a copy machine, a fax machine, a portable screen, and plus computer training and software licenses. So why did they need these things? Because they didn't have the capacity to go out into the community and go in front of, in the fellowship hall of churches and explain to the community why they needed to get on board with what's going on with the contamination in their backyard. They didn't have the tools that agencies have and the industries had, so they needed to ramp up. And so nobody had to take out a loan or anything. They just wrote a grant to get these, and I wrote the grant proposals for them. But they got the tools to make themselves look equal. People pay attention. That's why when you go to churches, people like to see the churches with the drop down screens now and the Zoom sort of, the audio interfacing and the wireless mics and all that stuff. But churches are paying for that. But, if you had a grant, say a telecommunications grant, and you taught people in your church how to use that equipment and run the soundboard and all of this stuff for the praise team to sound good, you could probably write a grant and use it for that. Because if you get equipment from a grant for a nonprofit, they don't care if you use it for your for-profit. They just want to make sure you used it first for your nonprofit. So the fact that I got a laptop and a camcorder for a nonprofit organization was fine, but I used it for educating the community about the nonprofit mission statement of that organization. But I also used it for my for-profit business and started doing multimedia and started taking people's videos and all sorts of things. And so, that's the clever way of making your passion, money, and resources benefit your for-profit side of the house. Any other questions?
Does anybody have any questions or anything? I know I kind of cut out a little bit.
I'm trying
But
to
does
talk
anybody
on
have?
everything, but I got more I could talk on. But you know, if y'all have questions, let me just shut up for a minute and let y'all get some words in.
Excuse me, my name is Hugh.
No.
I just want to ask a question about my vision. What I was thinking about in Florida, Miami. Because my business name is You Works Wonders, and it's a small remodel company that I start by myself. How do I go by, because this is my first time trying to, educate myself on this, or get some grant to help me get my tools together and push out there, and how do I go by that?
If you're talking about trying to get grants to help support your for-profit business, that's really not what grants are for. Grants are for nonprofits, and the very nature of a nonprofit organization is to be charitable for a need in society. So when you're thinking about establishing a nonprofit, that means you are passionate about something else that's going on in society. So how do you get around that to be able to use grants to buy tools? Say if you develop a nonprofit organization that supports, what's the name of your business again?
It's called You Works Wonders.
You Works Wonders. That almost sounds like it could be a nonprofit name. But if you have a You Works Wonders that's for profit, and then you have something different like, I don't know, you could call it, Works for Kids or something like that, but create a nonprofit entity and say the goal and mission of that organization is to teach the youth in your community or at-risk youth how to become developers like yourself or builders, and like almost like a Habitat for Humanity type of thing, to do works like that in your community. Then you can go after nonprofit money to support, say, now since I'm teaching the youth in my community how to do this kind of work, now that justifies me asking the federal government for a grant so I can purchase tools that they can use. And that way you're really building an apprenticeship program. And then once you get enough of them trained to do the work that you do, then you could be a foreman, a supervisor, and they're actually doing the work, and then parlay that into growing your for-profit business. But that's the way you disguise what you're trying to do in order to get the funding you need for the resources. Other than that, though, you can't use federal monies or foundation money by way of a grant to support direct for-profit kind of things like paying salaries and things like that. But what you can do, like I've run a couple of successful Superfund job training initiatives for the federal government. And what that is we work through a community nonprofit group as our partner. And what their role was to go into their community where there was desperation and the need for jobs, where people were hopeless and they couldn't get a traditional job because they might have had a felony or two, or public drunkenness, kind of charges and things like that. So they had lost hope and just given up and so living off the system. But this person, they were paid through our grant to find these people that, as long as there weren't serious felonies and things, and as long as they had their things had been expunged or whatever, or they had been beyond all of their probationary periods or what have you, then they could go into this training for an entry level job, and we would train them into being a hazardous waste technician for work at the Savannah River site, which is a Department of Energy nuclear facility. So non-traditional people got jobs and entry level jobs like moving dirt around and things like that, but it's like construction work. Somebody's breaking up. It didn't come through clear. Say that again, whoever said that. Maybe that was me, an echo. Can you hear me okay?
Yes, we can hear you.
Okay. So basically what I'm saying is there's a way to get around it, but if you want to tap into nonprofit monies from federal sources or foundations, the ideal goal is for you to think about using the skills that you have in creating a training program, or even a train the trainer program, to find other adults who might want to have a passion for dealing with youth and all of that, and teach them how to teach others. And then you run that school, and that is how you make money off of that.
Um, one of the question, I like that, but I'm not going in that direction. I'm going in the direction of the retiree people that, people that retire and they have the houses. I'm going in that direction. I'm going into the direction of helping the people that retire and they have a house and their house is running down. My service going to go for them. That's what my vision was.
Okay, so there's always all kinds of ways to spin it. So what I would say for that, for if you're talking about elderly people who are retired, who live in dilapidated housing, there's grants through the U.S. Department of Housing and Urban Development, for instance, HUD. They have what they call Healthy Homes Initiative. Now, the thing about it is, one organization, there are only certain limited organizations can apply for that. Like an individual who has a nonprofit can't apply for that, but schools and cities can apply for those grants. Like I helped write the Healthy Homes Initiative grant for Fort Valley State University. And what that university did was, because it's huge sums of money, like their proposal was written for $600,000. And that was written for, as soon as you cross the railroad tracks in Fort Valley, Georgia, onto the black side of the railroad tracks, you run through these shotgun shacks of ugly houses on State University Drive before you end up on this pristine diamond in the rough of a campus at the end of this street. So it was ugly for the community and for the university, because parents had to drive through that to drop their kids off. And say, I ain't dropping my kid off at this school. My daughter walking home from the library at night might get snatched up on one of these raggedy houses. But what we did with the grant was we paid to demolish some of them through code enforcement with the city. We partnered with them. And we also paid to put vinyl siding and repair roofs on the older people who didn't want to sell their homes.
Okay.
So it beautified. So there's ways to do that. If you want to help the elderly like that, then what I would say is you could partner with a local university and tell them that what you have an interest in. And then you could say, make me your community partner. I'm a builder. You don't have to know anything about building at your school, but you can apply for these funds. And then make me the contractor of choice, because I have a passion for dealing with elderly community homeowners in this part of Miami or wherever you are.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you very much.
That's just one idea, but like I said, we could spin it a lot of ways.
Okay, no problem. I'm just going to try to find somebody to help sit down with me and trying to get some more ideas and get everything on a piece of paper. That means I could get more understanding, but I understand what you're saying.
Go to a local university, or you could go to the city that you're in or the county government and say, look, you might not have a grant writer, or you probably haven't thought about applying for a Healthy Homes grant, or you haven't thought about it for this community because we did. Cities are fickle, and they would say, I'd rather put the money where economic development is hot. They're not interested in the old dilapidated neighborhoods, usually where our poor Black and brown folks live. So you could say, if that's your passion, you approach the city and say, apply for these funds and make me your contractor. And then get licensed as a contractor with the city, so your for-profit can make money, and then your nonprofit can make money.
Okay.
On the city's dime.
Okay. Thank you.
I could work it for you.
Yes. Thank you. I'm going to do that. Okay.
All right.
Okay.
Any other questions?
I have a question.
Yes.
Okay, so is there a prerequisite for attending your class? Do I have to be like a not-for-profit entity?
No, I mean, it's the goal is to explain to you. You could be a perfect novice, just like you are now. You can own a business. You could be Joe Blow on the street and just have an interest in finding out if grant writing is for you and how to tap into that pool of money. We need more people who are tapping into the nonprofit sector and managing it properly and being trained properly, and then meeting some of the needs in our communities, because there are more needs than there's money. So while we are in a good, also what's trending since the Obama administration, things lulled off under the Trump administration for obvious reasons, but it's now it's very advantageous. I'll just put it plainly. It's advantageous for Black and brown communities to go after some of this federal grant money, because these are where the needs are greatest. And now that the federal government is feeling a little guilt and feeling more interested in supporting our initiatives, as long as, you know, as long as they're legal and make sense.
So as an outcome of attending your classes, will I be prepared then to write a proposal for the entity that I'm trying to develop?
Yeah, what you'd have to do is, and like I say, when you first start, I will teach you everything about writing a fundable proposal. And so you can get any requests for proposals, requests for application from a federal agency or a foundation, and not be intimidated by it anymore, and be able to read it and understand it, and then be able to write a proposal based upon what they're asking for. That's what my full day class equips you with. Of course, it helps to remind yourself and get refreshers and things like that, but it will not give you your nonprofit status. You have to do that. There's an IRS form 1027 that you have to complete and submit in order to be a nonprofit organization. And it's ideal if you do it with a lawyer. If you have a friend, lawyer, family member, someone, it's a simple form. But if it comes on a lawyer's letterhead or with a cover letter from a law office, the IRS looks at it first. They put yours at the bottom of the stack if it's just from XYZ organization.
Okay.
So that's just one of the tricks. It's just the way it is. That they think it's more serious and more critical to get it, and you're serious about it. A lawyer might charge you anywhere from $500 to $1,500 to draft your paperwork up and do the cover letter and send in your information, depending on, you know, what it is you're proposing to do. But once you get your notification, then you can start applying as a nonprofit organization. If you even now though, even without having that designation, you can apply for funding, but you have to partner with a nonprofit group in order to stand a chance of getting it funded. In other words, they're called a fiduciary sponsor. So say if you as a for-profit business wanted to go after a grant to support a after-school program for youth, or say, since you're into writing, say you wanted to have a writing clinic or a series of writing seminars on how to be your own author, tell your own story for the Black community, the at-risk community, or the youth, and teach an after-school class for like high school juniors and seniors to tell their own stories. And then, but you're not a nonprofit, then you could partner, say, with the schools that you're teaching it in, which are nonprofit, and say, okay, we got this excellent instructor here. You let them know about the funding. You help them write the proposal and write yourself into it as the facilitator, and how much they'll have to pay you to bring you in to teach this class on every Saturday morning from 10 to 11 o'clock or whatever. Saturday Academy, or every Friday after school from 4 to 6 or what have you. And you know, you work it out like that. But you get paid from it. You also get to implement something that you want to see the community benefit from. So at the end result, everybody wins.
Okay. Thank you.
Yeah.
Kyle, I have a question. You mentioned earlier at the beginning of your introduction in reference to the program that you was speaking of in terms of the welding and the plumbing or what have you. I'm just going to use this as an example because I've worked on nuclear power plants in Florida, North Dakota, South Dakota, or what have you.
Mhm.
I'm union. I'm a union. Excuse me. I'm affiliated with the union. That's where I retired from.
Mhm.
So in Savannah and Augusta, I know for a fact that their union is a percentage of the work that goes towards non-union. So my question is, and my vision is to train guys on a level where it's that they you know, they might not be able to go to college or have that, how can I say, that intellect in order to sit in a college class in order to get in the trade. So I know for a fact that, I mean, I went to college as well, but I know for a fact that you can get into the program without a college degree. But some guys, I mean, in order to introduce them, say for instance, to teach a person how to swim, you first have to introduce them to the water. So that's the same thing, the approach I have to take in order to try to get them to understand about the plumbing. Because if you learn plumbing, eventually build yourself up to understand welding and pipe fitting, because it's a trade-off. And my struggle right now, and I'm using the word struggle for the simple reason, is trying to get them to understand this. I understand that you don't want to go to college. So that's why I want to set up a program where is that I can teach them the elementary, just like going to grade school. You start off pre-K, kindergarten, first grade, second grade, secondary school. So that's my mindset in order to try to get them, like you're saying, yeah, you can make $50 to $75 an hour. Some places you can make more than that. And you don't have to have a college degree. It's just understanding the skills. So that's why I want to go in the community. I don't care what community it is or anything like that, because there's so much out there to offer. And just to be able to have that kind of skill set, you can work anywhere in the world. So that's my mission, to be able to introduce them to something. Okay, listen, you might not be able to go to a 3 or 4 year college or what have you, but this trade here can feed you a lifetime, can feed your family. I mean, generational families can actually live off a skilled trade. So that's where I am right now, to be able to try to get people to come together, because there's certain things that I know that I'm not comfortable with doing, but I know to train them, I mean, hands-on training, and gradually get them into the intellectual part of it, that can be accomplished. But I know I need an army in order for me to do that. I'm talking about people of color, because some may be impatient. You don't know what the situation is. So I want to try to develop a training facility based on exactly what you were talking about. Because I mean, you can do this work anywhere in the world. Nuclear power plants, it can be a coal gen. I done worked on the space shuttle pads and right here in Titusville. And for a black guy, it was only a couple of us that actually got on. And in order to get into the nuclear power plants, you have to pass a test. I don't care what you're doing. You can be sweeping, be on the cleaning crew. You still got to pass a test in order to get inside what we call the rad area. The rad area is it's a hot area. That's where the radiation is. So you have
I'm
to
a
be
radiation task force leader for EPA, so yeah, I'm familiar with
okay.
that. Yeah.
All right, right. So out in Turkey Point, that's what we were doing. So no matter if you was a janitor person, just like you were saying, moving dirt or whatever, you still have to take that test to see where you're at. And you have to take a psychological test. And some of the brothers that's I mean, that's in the inner cities and stuff like that, they can't vision that type of thing. Like you said, it's a essential but non-essential job. But you still talking about 50, like say 50, $75 an hour. I've done a whole lot more than that. You know, understand what I'm saying? So
Right.
that's what I want to try to do. I got the experience. I know I can teach. I had guys to train me. I got all of the literature, things of that nature. And I have a wealth of contacts anywhere in this country. I call, they're gonna come. But I just need to be able to get some funding to be able to just get it started.
There's a couple of things that come to mind just listening to what you're saying. And what I would offer is that an approach would be for you to not only look at, I mean, because it sounds a lot like what Job Corps does. It takes a lot of people who are off the street. I've got a nephew I love dearly who he just wasn't academically inclined. He dropped out of high
Right.
school and he got his
Hmm.
welding certificate and has worked on railroad cars and things like that. But I tried to get him into the nuclear welding thing, but he's just
Right.
content making just basic whatever he's doing, and so, but my thing is this, I would offer that there are opportunities for people with skills like you to be an intermediary. And what I mean by that is companies which are usually run by people that don't look like us, really don't know how to market to us and say to us, if you could just get me some good, honest Black folks who will come to work. Like I talked to you about the job training initiatives that I ran for Department of Energy, which is an EPA grant. We partnered with a community partner, and her job was to find Pookie and Ray Ray them on the corner. I'm just speaking in very loose terms so you understand what I'm saying.
Yeah, I
She
understand.
found Pookie and Ray Ray them and told them basically, look, put down that brown bag and come to this seminar that I'm gonna try to get you some money in your pocket so you can feed your babies. And basically, well, that's you as the community person who runs the nonprofit have to be that sort of lens for the funding agency. Like, say I'm the agency that's funding you, then I'm gonna be like, I can't tell Pookie and Ray Ray to cut them crazy dreads out their hair and look decent, but I can tell you, and you can tell them and say, look, you could talk to them in a language they understand, and they built that social capital and respect for you because they know you from the community, and you positioned and presented yourself as such. So you could say, look, man, I ain't gonna tell you to cut your braids. Your braids are beautiful. It's a symbol of your African heritage, and I wouldn't tell you to do that. All I could tell you is the people behind that fence that's offering you this $50 hour job might be intimidated by that. Just like she would have to tell young ladies, I know you come from a generation that thinks it's fashionable to wear all these tattoos on your arms and your tramp stamp, and she could talk to them in a language that they can respect and understand. And then, but those people who work behind that fence is offering you this $50 hour job ain't gonna understand what that symbology means to you. And they're gonna think it's reflective of other bad decisions you might make as their employee. So even though I ain't gonna tell you to remove that tattoo, I'm gonna ask you to cover it up when you're working on the job. You know, it's a way to be tactful with people without degrading who they are, saying they gotta sell their soul or not be true to themselves just to do things. But that's where the money is in this time period where America is transitioning to grasping the fact that we're becoming a Black and brown nation and white people still run everything. So if you are a service provider for a nonprofit that can get people into the pipeline, she got so many people with, I mean, I've seen the extremes of what our community puts out there with gold fronts and tattoos on your face and the braids and purple and red braids, and just, you cannot present that to the corporate world and be deemed acceptable, even if you got them mannerable and knowing their jobs. At the end of the day, you have to be able to speak both languages. You're the mediator. So you go to the hood and talk whatever language it takes and offer them stipends to come to this training class and get the skill set so they can feed their babies and uplift their communities. And then you go to the corporate side and say, I can take these pieces of lead and mold them into gold. That's alchemy. That's transformational. And that's what's needed in order to, you should see when we have our graduations after these job training initiatives and you see these people who are thugged out, pants sagging and everything, and then they graduate our program, they got their first bank account ever in their life because they used to go into the check cashing place or the liquor store to cash their checks, and they got their first bank account and able to pay rent and see them in a suit and tie, and then build up corporate partnerships with, say, the local men's store in the Black neighborhood, menswear outlet or something, or K&G, and get them their first suit and tie, and they see themselves differently. Then the neighborhood looks at them differently. And then this is what empowers communities. But what you'll see will happen in those kinds of transitions is that the hood will try to bring you back down because they see you being successful. So these are our bigger dynamics. What I try to explain in my teaching is, like I said, with the community capacity building, is when you do good, you got to think about everybody in the hood don't like you to do good. You know, everybody doesn't want success. It's the crabs in the barrel thing. So we have to find a way to delicately explain to the corporate world through these grants and through our training programs that that quality of life issues weigh heavily on poor people. And people who have money don't even know the beginning of what that's about. You know, the hustle and the struggle and trying to maintain a quality of life and pull yourself out of poverty without being sucked back in by every one of your relatives who choose to sit on the porch and drink liquor. I'm just saying these are real life experiences of the people you're trying to help. So you got to be able to sell to the funding institutions that you are uniquely qualified in your skill set in the professional career to also reach back and deal with these hood quality of life things to take these bad elements, and maybe you can't change all of them. You can't change all of them. But say if you can get a percentage of them to change their ways and see the value, that's what I believe in. Education is the key. And I'm not talking about classroom education. I'm talking about saying, look, I'd have a PowerPoint and I was like, what do you want to be when you grow up? Basketball. You always say Michael Jordan. I want to be the next LeBron James. I said, really? So you on the basketball team in high school now? No. Well, you play on the AAU team? No. You play it after school with your friends? No. Well, then what makes you think you're going to be qualified to be LeBron James in the future? You're not even practicing for it now. So the thing is, for things like what you're proposing to do, you have to be able to build a pipeline, like I said, grow that apple tree. So you start with them all with a PowerPoint and say, this is what a lawyer makes coming out of college, but they got to go through this amount of school and this amount of degrees and this amount of college debt to get to that point. This is what you can make coming out of high school. Now look, after 10 years, how much you've amassed and how much it took them 8 years before they could start making money. And then another 2 years after this, 2 or 4 or 5 years after they pay off student loans. So 14 years before they start seeing profit. But meanwhile, you've got 14-year head start making good money as a welder or a pipe fitter or what have you. So that's what I'm talking about. You have to be able to sell that to the community that you want to help so bad. And you also have to sell to the corporate industries, entities that if I build it, they will come and they will be of quality and they will be proficient in these trades. I'm a product of something like that, but it's in the STEM categories. The Cooperative Developmental Energy Program at Fort Valley State was the first HBCU in the country to get Black kids interested in petroleum careers and the energy career fields. And I was a pre-med major, so I didn't know anything about that. But Black kids, if we see it, we could be it. So they started an internship program, and if you had an aptitude for math and science, they only pointed Black kids to you could be a doctor or a dentist. And they just started when I was in school to talk about engineering options. But I learned about environmental careers, and so I saw there was no Black people doing what I could do in the environmental career. So I said, this is wide open, and I don't have to go to med school for 6 years. Sign me up. So I did, and that became the pipeline that feeds me today, as a physical scientist. And so I'm saying, if we see it, we can be it. So I commend you on having that vision, but I'm just telling you how to approach it and what the real challenge is going to be, because it's going to be some people that just ain't going to see the value.
Well, I'm going through that. I've been going through that for some time now. I mean, here I'm in Miami, by the way, and someone who's basically hosting this Zoom call, she said to me, she said, Daddy, it might not be the right demographic area. I mean, and it just a big light went off. And I said, she's so right, because even in my church, I go to church, and I tell guys come in there, and my church is actually in the heart of the city of Miami, one of the toughest area in Miami. We're right down the street, and they drift in and out. Yeah, that's right. We're right there. We're right there right there.
I got a cleanup site on Northwest 62nd, the Continental Cleaners. Yeah.
Oh, get out of here.
Twice a year. Yeah. Right around the corner from the pork and beans before they start tearing them down.
Yeah. Well, we're a block away from the pork and beans. Right there. Right there. First Living Church in God in Christ, right there in the city. So with that said, I mean, guys come in and I, introduce myself, as a deacon or whatever. and I offer them certain things, and I tell them all the time, well, listen, this is what I do. This is what I used to do. If you're interested, I can train you. Meet me here at the church. I'm here, Bible study on Tuesday night. I'm at Sunday service. We can talk. So I used to use the church as my office. You understand? After service, we go in there and we talk. But I just found that a lot of guys, just like you said, I mean, obviously, the demographic area, that area is, I mean, it's tough. Even when we actually go and walk through the community, just talking to people, preaching to them or whatever. And I'm always throwing in what I do. And it's just that mindset. And I can see it on their face or whatever. And a lot of guys, one guy came in with I guess his mentor, meaning, someone that he knew. And I explained it to the elder about what I was doing. And the guy said, well, you know what? I ain't never heard of that. I said, wow. And I just ended the conversation right then and there because I know where his mind was.
Right.
So, I'm a product of that because I had to learn this trade at a later age, but I saw people that saw something in me. And this person, he just took me up under his wings and I never looked back. Never looked back.
I also think I want to add something. I think Daddy, to what you're saying too, in that community, that could be a perfect community to start that, but it's just a matter of, like Cal was saying, just kind of getting plugged in and maybe marketing it in a way that they'll gravitate to it. You know what I'm saying? Because like you got all the resources right there. It's just a matter of getting plugged in with another community group or something like that so they could physically see, because money is what talks and makes sense down there, because the guys out there, they're on the corners and all this. So you have to compete with that money, to show them how they can make some legal money.
Yeah.
I mean,
but you know what though, sweetie, Mina, you know what? I tried that, and believe it or not, and I was like passed on. But then again, I knew from just the end of the conversation that basically what they was trying to do is just to switch it, meaning, okay, it's fine. We can take your idea and put it in the forefront. We're going to put you way back at the end. So I knew, because the guy asked me, well, how much money you think you're going to need or what have you. So I did some research on this person, and come to find out the person that I was speaking with, he knew this person and he knew this person's brother, and it wasn't a good rapport with him. So I went through about 2 or 3 guys like that. And the only thing I was just trying to say, I'm not trying to take over your vision or your business or whatever. Is any way that we can basically, like come together and just build something right here in the community itself. I mean, I was planning on right in Liberty City on 62nd and 7th Avenue. That was my target area. And that's the reason why I was using the church, because we're right there down the street from Polk and Bean, right down the street. And they're building Polk and Beans up, and there is no black contractors. I see these brothers pushing brooms, and they're building that, they reviving that entire area. Polk and Beans will not be in existence within next 3 to 5 years from now.
I was going to tell you that it's being gentrified, and that's what's happening in a lot of our Black urban centers.
There you go.
It's because of what our agency is heavily involved with, and that is climate change, because of ocean sea level rise. And so South Beach is encroaching more inland, and that's taking over Little Haiti.
There you go.
That's taking
Exactly.
over Liberty City, such that the city manager in Miami is changing the name of Liberty City to Model City, because the name of Liberty City is so toxic. I mean, every time you turn on the first 48, which I watch, it's always in Liberty City. So I was like, there in Houston. So
it's going to be Hialeah. It's going to be Hialeah, not to cut you off, but they pushing that to Hialeah.
Hialeah now?
That's what it's going to be. I have an aunt that's over in the community, and they gradually pushing down from 32nd Avenue. They headed straight to 27th Avenue. 27th Avenue, they're going to go straight across 7th Avenue.
So that's one thing that will that could complicate, anything that makes people want to do good in the neighborhood. If there's politics that's playing into, no, we like them warring with each other and gang banging, because that means it's going to be easier to get them out of here. Property values will be cheap.
There you go.
And so, but so you need to just, that's not saying it can't work, but I'm just saying you could test the waters with it. But one thing I would advise is that if you're going to do any kind of training program, um, look at who they trust. Who are their gatekeepers? Because there's stakeholders and then there's gatekeepers in the community. The gatekeepers are the people they trust, like that boy's mentor, the gang leaders or whatever. If they're if they're listening to those people because those people will throw them a couple of dollars to be corner boys or whatever, then maybe you need to talk to that leader about, look, I'm trying to provide longevity in terms of economic sustainability for these young men. So you could provide them money for this quick money like they're getting now. Fine, I'm not trying to interrupt your business operation, but let some of these young boys sit in on some of these seminars. Sometimes, because we have so many Black churches in our community, the community becomes sensitized to it because we're preaching something to them that they feel like they can't attain. Like, I'm living in this world now. I'm living in this hell now, and you are not.
Right.
You're preaching on the world, the afterlife, as opposed to what I could do right now. And so you're giving them a solution to that. So I would just say find creative ways to get in good with their gatekeepers, whoever they're trusting. And like I said, also get the seeds, the younger kids. It
Right.
might take longer
Yeah.
for them to
Yeah.
get.
Yeah. That's true.
Start younger.
Yeah. Yeah. That's my goal. That's my goal.
Yeah.
Wow.
Are there any more questions for Cal? I want to keep everybody beyond our 5:30 time.
I just wanted to ask, I'm Dr. Walden, Mina's mom, coupled with her father, because we talk a lot about different things. I do have a non-for-profit ministry. He wants to get involved with what he was just explaining. So how could there be, if any, a grant written, because he's still looking for a venue? And I am coupled with another ministry apostolically as an apostolic leader to bring them to a different level. But I do have my own non-for-profit ministry since 2009 that I do other things out of because I disband the congregation via the Lord's command. Okay, so with that, how could he bind up under my ministry, the non-for-profit, and there, if possible, be a grant that come out of there that can help with some type venue to get him started, as well as some other things that I would like to do. And not only that, having a portion of disability, how would that grant, if gotten, affect us concerning the IRS if we're getting paid a salary? Because most ministries, like the pastors, I'm a pastor, they get offerings instead of taking from the tithes and actually getting a check cut. They'll take the the free will offerings so that they can be up under the radar. So it's like a twofold question.
To answer the first part of it, I would just say, I mean, just like I mentioned earlier about him just being a for-profit business and having a fiduciary sponsor. If you're already 501c3 organization, then he will just partner with you and you'd be the one to apply. He could write the grant with you and for, say, a community center. Say that if you are saying that you have the facilities already, that his courses or his training can be taught in a facility that you already have access to that is sufficient, that's one thing. It's another thing if you could say, okay, well, we're going after grant money to add on to this existing facility or build a fellowship hall that's going to have training rooms in it where this training and other trainings are going to take place, or a business incubator is going to be established for this community. And one of those incubators will be this training school for trades. You could go out for a grant like that, and he's just going to be like someone on a line item on your grant that is a service provider, and your grant, your nonprofit organization would be the manager of that grant and make sure that the funds go to, paying for the construction of the facility and facilitators and everything it takes to make that to meet your deliverables, whatever you say in the grant that gets funded. So as far as the disability question, that's more, I would say I don't know enough about how someone who receives a disability payment operates in terms of grants. I think that that's probably best for a lawyer probably to answer that question as far as how your as far as
we could get Johan, my accountant, to answer that question, because he'll probably be able to answer as far as how the disability and the nonprofit works as far as, the tax portion. So we can talk to him more about that as well. But I think what Cal was saying earlier too is all about wording. I assume as far as how you pay yourself. So if you're paying yourself a salary, then of course, yeah, that might have, you might have issues with that with the IRS, because like you can't make X amount of dollars if you're on disability. But if it's a different kind of offering, or if it's a different kind of donation or something like that, then that might be okay. But we'll have to talk to Johan more about that, because I think he'll be more versed when it comes to taxes and disability and stuff.
One thing I will say to that real quickly is that, you could probably, just identify your in-kind donations and say you don't get a salary. Just say that on paper, but you actually have an agreement, say through your facilitators, to say, okay, I'm paying you $200 per session as a facilitator, but that that's only 100 of that is yours, that kind of thing. It's sort of like you're structuring it so that you're not getting paid directly through the grant.
Yep, I totally agree. It's all about how you word it.
That's right.
Pretty much, it's all about wording. So if there's no other questions, I'm good. Cal, again, I'm gonna get with you this week. My life has calmed down a little bit. Oh, Ernestine got one, but we'll definitely talk this week as far as getting the actual classes and stuff together. Ernestine?
Yes, I just wanted to know a website that he might have to take a look at the offerings for the class.
I don't have a website anymore because, like I said, it's not my day job. I have Bryant Global has an umbrella of interests, and so I don't have a website for just this. What I'd like to do is,
Yes.
But I do a lot of things for people in terms of multimedia development, all this stuff, and haven't worked on a web presence for mine because when I had one up, I got bombarded, and I travel a lot on my job, and so I would rather just organize and jump into the fray when it's a good time and where I see it's a synergy of ideas to go forward. But my contact information, I'm sure Mina can share that with all of you.
I'll share it.
Okay.
Yep.
Thank you.
And the website is in the making. I'm claiming that because we're working on some stuff. So it's coming.
Good.
It's coming. So Cal, thank you so much. I can't thank you enough for this wealth of information. I've learned a lot. As he mentioned, I'll send out his name, his information, email address, and stuff like that. So if you have any follow-up questions after this, definitely feel free to reach out to him. And once we get the classes together, as far as the grant writing and stuff, I'll definitely hand that out to everyone. And if you can't be there in person, we'll still have a means to be able to do it on Zoom as well, since this is the way of the future at this point. So other than that, thank you everyone for joining. Those that have been here before, those that are new, thank you so much for being a part and asking such thought-provoking questions to Cal. If you guys don't have anything else, we'll reconvene our normal classes. I'll send that out to the crew I have as far as our next session, which will be, I think that's Easter is the first weekend in April. So it'll be the weekend after Easter, which will be April 11th, I think. So that's when we'll have our next session. So I'll send the information out. So other than that, you guys have a great Sunday. And thank you again.
Bye.
Thank you.
Thank you. God bless.